From Attorney General Jeff Sessions to Congress. Republican Peter King is here. So is former Congressman Jason Chaffetz. He talked today with the U.S. Attorney Sessions has appointed in lieu of the special counsel. So much new tonight, so let's get you up to speed. Attorney General Jeff Sessions says he will not immediately appoint a new special counsel to investigate alleged bias against the Trump administration at the FBI and Justice Department, despite intense pressure from congressional Republicans. Clarifying a move you heard about here first. Sessions is directing a senior federal prosecutor, Utah's U.S. Attorney John Huber, to evaluate certain issues, including whether such an appointment is even necessary. Huber's review is ongoing, and Sessions says he's getting regular updates. Now, Huber is an Obama administration holdover, but he's also far away from the D.C. swamp, so folks like that. What's unclear is how it's going to go down with congressional Republicans like Peter King. He'll be with us in just a moment. But first, Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry is following the late-breaking developments tonight. Good evening, Ed.
Shannon, great to see you. And new tonight, some sort of supporters of President Trump are again slamming the Attorney General Jeff Sessions, charging that he continues to pass the buck by not naming a second special counsel. But what his critics may be missing is that, as you just noted, the Attorney General is signaling with this letter for the first time that criminal prosecutions are on the table for FBI and Justice Department officials from the Obama administration who may have broken laws when they engaged in FISA abuse to spy on the Trump campaign, because Sessions already has a criminal prosecutor all over this. In a letter tonight to Republicans Chuck Grassley, Trey Gowdy, and Bob Goodlatte, Sessions is reserving the right to name a second special counsel beyond Robert Mueller down the road to hold officials at the FBI and the Justice Department accountable. But Sessions is revealing, as you noted, he signaled to you first in an interview just a few weeks back, that he already has been quietly having U.S. Attorney John Huber of Utah operating outside the Beltway, using his prosecutorial powers with a broad mandate to investigate misconduct that could actually extend beyond the FISA abuse. So the former top officials at the FBI, like James Comey and Andrew McCabe, could be facing scrutiny for not just failing to tell the FISA judge that the anti-Trump dossier was paid for by the DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign. This prosecutor could be looking at McCabe's leaking to the media that was unauthorized, his lying to investigators, plus those FBI text messages we've heard so much about. In fact, we learned today that friends of McCabe have now set up a GoFundMe page to help pay for his legal costs that may be escalating rather dramatically, because Sessions wrote to senior lawmakers, quote, "I am confident Mr. Huber's review will include a full, complete, and objective evaluation of these matters in a manner that is consistent with the law and the facts. I receive regular updates from Mr. Huber, and upon the conclusion of his review, will receive his recommendations as whether any matters not currently under investigation should be opened, whether any matters currently under investigation require further resources, or whether any matters merit the appointment, yes, of a special counsel." This evening, two of the recipients of the Sessions letter, Congressman Gowdy and Goodlatte, responded, saying, quote, "While we continue to believe the appointment of a second special counsel is necessary, this is a step in the right direction. We expect U.S. Attorney Huber, given his reputation, will conduct an independent and thorough investigation." Now, Sessions faced heat again last night when we reported that the Justice Department Inspector General was reviewing all of this. Critics immediately said that official at the department does not have prosecutorial powers. Well, John Huber does. And Sessions, of course, hinted at this at that interview with Shannon. He didn't name Huber directly, but in the interview, he suggested this was already going on. Watch.
"I have appointed a person outside of Washington, many years in the Department of Justice, to look at all the allegations that the House Judiciary Committee members sent to us, and we're conducting that investigation."
Now, Huber was first nominated by then-President Barack Obama, so if Huber brings criminal charges, it will have more credibility. Likewise, if he finds no criminal wrongdoing, it will be noted this was someone who was renominated by President Trump when he came to office and had the backing of conservative Republicans like Mike Lee, Orrin Hatch out in Utah, Shannon.
All right, Ed Henry with the latest details. Thank you. So is Huber enough, or do some GOP lawmakers believe a second special counsel is what it's going to take to get to the bottom of what's happened at the FBI and DOJ? Well, let's ask one of them. Let's bring in New York Republican Congressman Peter King, who also sits on the House Homeland Security Committee. Congressman, great to have you with us tonight.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you very much.
All right, what do you make of what we heard from the Attorney General today? You heard Ed reporting there that Chairman Goodlatte and Gowdy have said it's a step in the right direction, but they have been very clear they want a second special counsel. What do you think?
Yeah, historically, I've been opposed to special counsels. However, I did feel this was one situation where it was warranted. I still believe that. I though would not underestimate what the Attorney General has done. So I'm probably in the same position right now as Trey Gowdy. This is a significant step, and it does show that the Attorney General is considering criminal prosecution here. This is a criminal investigation. That's the terminology he's been using. So this is more than just somebody looking at it. This is an experienced prosecutor looking at very serious allegations. And if I were people at the top levels of the FBI, I'd be very concerned right now. Again, I think a special counsel is the ideal, but I wouldn't write this off. I wouldn't minimize it the way some people are.
All right, here's what the Attorney General said in his letter. He said the appointment of a special counsel by design is reserved for use in only the most extraordinary circumstances. I'm confident that Mr. Huber's review will include a full, complete, and objective evaluation that is consistent with the law and the facts. He noted that since these regulations regarding special counsel went into effect since 1999, there have only been 2 occasions. Why do you think this rises to the level of making it a third?
Because of the fact that we're talking about top levels in the FBI, the Justice Department, who could potentially be involved, and that makes it more difficult for somebody within the Department of Justice, including a U.S. attorney, to follow this all the way. Now, again, Mr. Huber apparently is very highly regarded, and again, this is a step forward, but I do think more could be done. But again, I want to give the Attorney General credit here, and I don't want to diminish what he's doing. Also, Shannon, if I can say, there's such a really a web at the top of the FBI and the Justice Department. I think we have to consider even in addition, something else, almost like what we had in New York, a Knapp Commission, where we get judges and former U.S. attorneys to look at the entire operations as to what went on here at the highest levels of the FBI and the Department of Justice. But I know this is a separate issue, but I just wanted to put that out there because really this is, and I've been a great defender of the FBI, but what we've seen over the last year is, is really distressing. And again, I think let's give Huber a chance on this. Let's not rush to judgment and, demand perfection here. I think this is a significant step by the Attorney General.
Okay, so we have the Inspector General at the Justice Department looking into a number of these issues, and we now have word that the senior U.S. attorney is also looking into several of them. Are you confident that you're going to get the answers to the questions you have about what happened with the FISA warrants, about what happened with the Hillary Clinton email investigation? Do you think that one of those 2 or both of them will get you the conclusions you're looking for?
I am more confident than I was before. And I think also the Inspector General, Mr. Horowitz, is extremely able, extremely aggressive. And while he does not have criminal powers per se, he can make referrals. And I think the combination of U.S. Attorney Huber and the Inspector General Horowitz is a pretty potent force right now. Again, ideally, it would be a special counsel, but this is a long way down the road. And I again, think that Jeff Sessions should be given some credit for this, and it shouldn't be written off. We shouldn't, diminish this or demean it. And from everything we've heard, the IG report coming out from the Inspector General, from Mr. Horowitz, is going to be extremely significant. So again, we're a long way further down the road than we were, several weeks ago, several months ago.
Are you confident that we're going to get information that any of these investigators or congressional committees are seeking from the FISA court about the application, about what went into their considerations? Because, it's another branch. It's something totally different. And they have been, it seems, resistant at this point to make anything public. It's a very secretive by its nature body. That's the whole point.
Yeah, and it does raise issues as to who should have access, even if access is given, because the whole idea of FISA is it is being kept secret. But again, I think there should be people who should get access to it. This is, again, so extraordinary. People are so caught up in being anti-Trump. But when you think of a presidential campaign, that there was this type of investigation, that there was actually a FISA warrant issued on the flimsiest evidence, and what it seems to be, in many cases, manufactured evidence, this is really significant. I mean, if it's true, and I was part of the Nunes memo, I agree with it, and if our allegations in there are accurate, this is really extremely significant that again, a campaign for President of the United States, that this type of criminal investigation was ordered of that campaign. It's really extraordinary and really unprecedented in American history.
Well, we understand that Huber has been investigating at least since November, according to this letter today, so we may be closer to answers than we think. Congressman Peter King, always good to see you, sir.
Shannon, thank you very much.
All right, the administration planning a big announcement about the border wall tomorrow. as the president made some news today about his priority project and how he plans to get the money to pay for it after getting shortchanged by Congress. Leland Vittert has all the details, joins us now. Hey, Leland.
Yeah, we'll see if he can do that end run to get the money, Shannon. Despite considerable setbacks and delays on his signature campaign promise, the president seems undeterred.
That's what I do is I build. I was always very good at building. It was always my best thing. I think better than being president, I was maybe good at building. Like you people, you're good at building. I think maybe we'll be better at president, David. That would be good.
Oh, the White House scheduled today's visit to Ohio for the president to talk about his massive infrastructure plan. He didn't say much about that except to say it's unlikely that it will happen until after the midterms, with many conservatives angry about the massive spending bill he did sign. In that bill were hundreds of millions of dollars for the military that he talked to Defense Secretary Mattis about using for his wall.
We have $1.6 billion, and we've already started. You saw the pictures yesterday. I said, what a thing of beauty. And on September 28th, we go further, and we're getting that sucker built.
It appears he is referring to a presidential tweet yesterday, complete with pictures of work on a border wall that is anything but newly approved or from the current spending package.
We spend billions of dollars in other countries maintaining their borders, and we can't maintain our borders in our own country. Is there something a little bit wrong with that? Think of it. We spend billions and billions of dollars. Look, North and South Korea, 32,000 soldiers, the finest equipment, barbed wire all over the place. We protect that whole thing.
Speaking of South Korea, just this week, the administration telegraphed that all-done trade deal as evidence of the president's success on another campaign promise that the deal still had to be signed. But today, the president announced he might hold up the same deal as leverage over the South if things get sticky with North Korea. Shannon, something that certainly the markets did not expect.
All right, Leland Vittert, thank you very much, sir. The State Department planning to roll out a new round of so-called extreme vetting regulations tomorrow. Rich Edson has that story. Rich.
Good evening, Shannon. The Trump administration is moving closer to implementing new rules for those entering the United States. Tomorrow, the State Department will publish in the Federal Register a proposal that would ask those applying for a visa to enter the United States to relinquish their social media account information over the past 5 years. The State Department official says there will be no request for the passwords to those accounts. They're really just looking for handles or names. The proposal would also require those looking to enter the U.S. provide 5 years of phone numbers, email addresses, international travel, and whether they've been deported or removed from any country, or if a family member has been involved in any terrorist activities. The State Department says it expects these new rules to affect about 14 million people applying to come to the United States. Now, these new standards would only affect those applying for a visa. There are millions of visitors from dozens of countries who can come to the United States without a visa. They would be exempted from these new standards. The new rules include a policy directing immigrants from countries where female genital mutilation is prevalent to a pamphlet informing them that the practice is illegal in the U.S. The administration has pursued President Trump's promised extreme vetting of those looking to travel to the U.S. This seems to fit into that category, along with the controversial travel ban. Tomorrow begins a 60-day period where the public can comment on these new rules. Then another 30-day period would happen after that before the federal government would finally finalize these new standards. Shannon?
All right, Rich Edson at the State Department, thank you so much. U.S. officials say there's no justification for Russia's retaliatory moves to expel 60 American diplomats and shutter the U.S. consulate in St. Petersburg. Russia's foreign minister announced the action today. It's the Kremlin's response to punitive measures over its alleged involvement in the poisoning of a former Russian spy in England. Also today, we learned the spy's daughter, who was also affected, is no longer in critical condition, though he remains so. April 27th, that is the date North and South Korea have set for their first summit in more than a decade. It follows Kim Jong-un's surprise visit to China, where he allegedly pledged his commitment to denuclearization. The Koreas will meet at a border village. Kim is set to meet with President Trump in May, though we are still waiting for details and a date for that meeting. Reuters reporting tonight, special counsel Robert Mueller is probing possible contacts the Trump campaign had with Russians during the 2016 Republican National Convention. Mueller's team has reportedly been interested in a convention-related event attended by both Jeff Sessions and Russia's ambassador to the U.S., and why anti-Russia language in the GOP platform was removed. Former Trump campaign foreign policy advisor J.D. Gordon pushing back on those reports tonight, calling it character assassination via anonymous sources. He told Fox News at Night it's recycled garbage from nearly 2 years ago. Well, 9 months ago, Steve Scalise nearly died after being shot on a baseball field in Alexandria, Virginia. Next up, we'll size up his chances of capping his courageous comeback as the next Speaker of the House. Well, for centuries leading a virtuous life, meant Catholic, a top aide on her staff for 3 months after learning he allegedly threatened and allegedly hit another former aide whom he had dated. SD has issued a statement saying, in part, to this survivor and to anyone else on my team who was hurt by my failure to see what was going on in my office, I am so sorry. I'm sorry that I failed to protect her and provide her with a safe and respectful work environment that every employee deserves. I'm sorry that I hurt her, her friends, family, and coworkers, and many of my present and former staffers. Well, less than a year ago, House Majority Whip Steve Scalise was shot on a baseball field in Virginia. Now that the congressman's on the mend physically, he's sparking rumors he may be aiming to become the next Speaker of the House. In an interview with Politico, Scalise said, quote, I wouldn't rule it out. Obviously, I've shown interest in the past at moving up. I've enjoyed being in leadership. Fox News politics editor and already chuckling editor of the Halftime Report, Chris Stirewalt, for analysis.
Do you want these donuts? In the past, I have shown interest in having delicious donuts, so you never know.
Well, and this is coming on the heels of all these rumors that Speaker Ryan's going to step down. His office says he's not resigning. What do you make of all the chatter?
Well, really what's interesting here is Scalise, the dynamic here is Paul Ryan, I think everybody knows that Paul Ryan never wanted to be Speaker of the House, and he did it because it fell to him, and he was the only guy that could unite the fractious wings of that conference. And that he's not going to be there forever. There are the rumors that persist, oh, he's going to leave a minute, he's going to leave any minute. I'm sure he wishes he could. But in that space, Kevin McCarthy, the majority leader from California, has been jockeying for position. He would be the logical next in line, right? Of course, he was the logical next in line to replace John Boehner, and that went over like a Led Zeppelin and did not work. But he figures in era of Trump, and I assume he figures that in the era of Trump, and he has been nuzzling the president in very vigorous ways, bringing him Starbursts with the other flavors he doesn't like picked out, and also, all sorts of things to suck up to the president. So McCarthy has been working that track pretty aggressively. Here's Scalise, though. Scalise is a much more interesting figure here. He's really number 3. But because of his remarkable story and his credibility with conservatives in the House, Scalise is the kind of guy that if he wants to make a play for the speakership, if it becomes available, McCarthy has a real problem on his hands. So this is the kind of jockeying that could get very intense very quickly.
There are, we could agree, better Starburst flavors than others. They're not all equal.
Well, the orange Starbursts are for monsters, for terrible, terrible monsters.
If you like the orange, it's at Chris Stirewalt.
I don't think anybody even eats the lemon. I think the lemon is just...
I don't know.
Pink. It's the pink is so good. The pink is obviously so good.
And the red ones, too.
Yeah.
Listen, other news we just were talking about breaking in the House tonight. This news that Congresswoman Elizabeth Esty knew for a while that somebody stayed on her payroll when there were these allegations against him of potential domestic issues. In the era of Me Too, will there be forgiveness of this?
I doubt it. You know, we have to put her in the right context. This is a key district in Connecticut, number one. Number two, her husband is a leading voice on climate change in the Democratic Party and nationally. He's a Yale professor who formerly served in Connecticut state government. This is a sort of a power couple in Connecticut government, very liberal people, progressive icons in their state. For her to have abided this for as long as she did, given the situational awareness of the moment, if Al Franken can't be in the Senate, I have a hard time seeing how Democrats are going to let this stand for her in the House. I think she is in very, very serious trouble. Okay, we will track that story again, breaking tonight, so we don't have a lot of details, but enough to have the basics of the story. Now, I want to play a little bit of something that came from Keith Ellison, Congressman, a Democrat, top Democrat in many ways. Co-deputy, second chairman of the Democratic National Committee. A DNC official. Earlier this week, former Vice President Joe Biden said he doesn't like this idea of a universal income where everybody in the U.S. would get a payment of some kind. So everybody's getting some kind of salary. He said, you know, the job isn't just about the paycheck. It's about dignity and your contribution to society. Well, this is what Congressman Ellison had to say.
I personally do think that universal basic income is an idea that has a lot of merit. I don't think that universal basic income means people sit around. I think it means do other things that are necessary.
Where do you put this on the scale of, like, how far out this is for the Democrats? Is this mainstream for them?
It's not mainstream, and it's not even it's not a traditionally liberal idea. This could almost be, there are libertarians who have talked about why this is good, because basically their argument is, we'll just pay instead of breaking down the welfare state into individual benefits, we'll just give everybody a guaranteed income, and then that'll be that. But of course, then conservatives say, yeah, but the other programs never go away. Then you just end up with two. But Joe Biden was giving voice to the traditional Democratic Party, which is the party of labor. Labor both in the sense of organized labor and labor in the sense of physical labor, that people have to go work. FDR's concept, the New Deal concept of the purpose of government being to give people work, to get people back to work for the dignity of that work. Ellison saying that is a total departure from that. But you know who else was talking about labor and the dignity of work today? Donald J. Trump in Ohio, because he has staged a successful raid on those traditional blue-collar Democrats. His values and their values line up very well together. He's talking about infrastructure, yada, yada, yada. And it gives us a good insight. Ellison gives us a good insight on this rupture inside the Democratic Party between the traditional and Biden and the different, much more progressive, much more liberal way.
Wonder how much we'll see of that when 2020 rolls around. You will be here to pontificate on it.
Okay, that's a deal.
All right, Chris Narwhal, thank you.
Okay, bye.
All right, California loves regulations, but will Californians love a new ruling tonight out of a court that it's going to hit their morning Joe? Plus, did the Pope really say he doesn't believe there's a hell? We're trying to figure out how the Golden State is taking the lead once again. Two very different stories, both stirring up controversy. Good evening, Trace.
Good evening, Shannon. The first is cheerleaders. The Indianapolis Colts and Baltimore Ravens both have stuntmen on the sideline, and there is a man claiming he cheered for the '87 Atlanta Falcons. But officially now, the Los Angeles Rams are the first team in NFL history to have male cheerleaders. Perone and Napoleon Jennings were among 76 finalists to audition for the squad, and after 3 weeks of rigorous physical and mental testing, the two men joined 38 women to make up the 2018 team. Both Jennings and Perone are classically trained dancers and have been performing for most of their lives. Here they are. Watch.
Why can't I do this? So I called my friend Raquel and I asked her when auditions were for the Rams, and she told me Sunday, and I showed up and we're here.
We had a bunch of rehearsals in between and an extensive interview process, but it was really humbling and amazing to be invited every time you came back.
The team captain says the men are, quote, intelligent, eloquent, and more than qualified. The Rams' new stadium, by the way, along with the Chargers, opens in 2020. And at the new stadium's coffee kiosks, talk about a transition, there will be cancer warning labels. A Los Angeles judge has ruled that California law requires coffee companies to post the warnings because of a chemical called acrylamide. It's produced in the roasting process. Though, if our non-scientific survey is correct, it appears the ruling will have very little impact on coffee consumption. Watch.
And I've been drinking coffee. Nothing changed with the ruling. It's just warning people about the potential dangers, which were always there and will continue to be there.
So many people drink so much coffee that I feel like, does it really even matter at this point? I mean, it's like, you know, everything is kind of a carcinogen these days.
Yeah, the backstory is Starbucks and 90 other coffee sellers were sued under California's Safe Drinking Water Act, which has been credited with reducing chemicals in everything from hair dye to nasal sprays. But California businesses now have to warn customers about the presence of some 900 chemicals that may cause cancer. And for the record, the World Health Organization says coffee is not a cancer risk. Shannon.
We're going to go with them then. That's where we're going to settle this thing. Trace, thank you very much. Good to see you.
You're welcome.
All right, the Vatican is disputing an interpretation of comments by Pope Francis that claim the pontiff declared there is no hell. Garrett Tenney has the latest on a story catching the attention of spiritual and secular alike around the world during Christianity's holiest week.
Shannon, the Vatican is dealing with a doctrinal controversy just ahead of Easter weekend after the Pope allegedly said that hell doesn't exist. That's according to an article in Italy's left-leaning La Repubblica newspaper. The paper's founder, Eugenio Scalfari, an avowed atheist, wrote the story after a private meeting with Pope Francis at the Vatican earlier this week. In that meeting, the 93-year-old journalist claims he asked the Pope where bad souls go and where they are punished, to which the Pope allegedly replied, "They are not punished. Those who repent obtain God's forgiveness and take their place among the ranks of those who contemplate Him, but those who do not repent and cannot be forgiven disappear. A hell does not exist. The disappearance of sinning souls exists." That quote, breaking with 2,000 years of Catholic teachings, quickly spread around the world. But it's also not clear those were Pope Francis's exact words. Scalfari, who struck up a friendship with Francis, has previously admitted he doesn't take notes or make recordings of their conversations, and often uses his own words when quoting His Holiness. Today, the Vatican didn't confirm or deny the alleged quote, but did attempt to discredit the article, saying it is the result of the author's reconstruction in which the exact words pronounced by the Pope are not quoted. No quotes of the aforementioned article must therefore be considered as a faithful transcription of the words of the Holy Father. Pope Francis has repeatedly spoken of the reality of hell since becoming pontiff, including a very public address in 2014 when he warned members of the mafia that hell is where they'd end up if they didn't repent. This also isn't the first time the Vatican's had to distance itself from Scalfari, who's published several other controversial articles after private meetings with the pontiff over the last 5 years. Shannon?
All right, Garrett Tenney, thank you very much. All right, so now we know why a federal prosecutor from Utah was in Washington today. Up next, someone who knows him and happened to run into him today. He didn't know the news, but he weighs in on John Huber's probe of accusations against the FBI. And somewhere out there is a runaway Chinese space station. It's the size of a school bus hurtling back to Earth. We're going to try to clear up the real-world impact of the falling satellite. The FBI, the Clinton Foundation, and possible FISA court abuses. Fox News contributor and former House Oversight Chairman Jason Chaffetz, also from Utah. Great to have you with us today.
Glad to be here.
Okay, so in the airport today, you run across John Huber. You guys aren't close friends, but you know who he is. Did you ever think for a minute, what's he doing here?
No, I was flying from Salt Lake to D.C. He was going from D.C. back to Utah, and we kind of passed paths. We talked. We chatted about our kids and family, and then an hour later, the news broke, and he knew. He just didn't say anything.
Of course, because apparently he has been investigating since at least November. At least that's the letter that the Attorney General or someone from DOJ put out without naming him. So today we get his name. Here's what we know about him. He's described as an experienced federal prosecutor. He was unanimously confirmed by the Senate twice. He prosecuted a number of high-profile cases, coordinated task forces on violent crime and terror. Now, what do you make tonight of the folks who are saying he was appointed by President Obama? He's an Obama holdover. Before that, he worked in the DOJ. So how can he investigate these guys?
Well, he was appointed by both the Obama administration, but then also in the Trump administration, and to be confirmed unanimously twice in the United States Senate says something about it. He's a very nice, decent human being. I don't find him to be particularly political. With that said, I think it's unfair and inappropriate for the Attorney General and Rod Rosenstein to ask him and put him in a position where he essentially has to investigate his boss. I mean, what other situation would you ever do that in? You wouldn't do that at the Department of Justice, but they do it. That is terribly unfair. I think it's inappropriate. And I don't think you'll ultimately be able to get to the truth. I don't think you can get from here to there.
You're not alone in that. Your former colleague, Congressman Mark Meadows, said this in a tweet today. He said, so the Obama DOJ can open a legally questionable investigation into the Trump campaign, allegedly based on a campaign volunteer mouthing off at a London bar. But this DOJ can't appoint a second special counsel after all the troubling documents we've seen. Disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the standard by which Mr. Mueller was appointed, and then look at the standard by which both the House and Senate, key members on the Republican side of the aisle, are asking for a special prosecutor, the standards are totally different, which begs the question why. And I guess I would ask it in the reverse. What's the case against appointing a special prosecutor? You have the director of the FBI who was fired. You had the #2 person at the FBI who was fired. You have, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, who had to be demoted and moved in their positions. You have the inappropriate text. You have Bruce Orr, whose wife is working at the place in which they're a subject of an investigation. Extraordinary circumstances galore. And as Jim Jordan pointed out, what else does there need to be for somebody to be appointed to investigate the FBI. You just can't investigate yourself. But that's what they're asking John Huber to do, and I think it's unfair.
I'm going to keep you in the column for needs second special counsel.
Yeah,
I don't think you're coming out of that column.
Go ahead. Check that box for me, yeah.
I know that you were working on a much anticipated book about the deep state.
Yes.
Do you think that's a legitimate problem here in these cases here in Washington now?
I do. I think there's this bureaucracy that is so embedded, and they know they can just wait out the politicians and the career-oriented people, and they don't want scrutiny. That's why, think about it, there have been subpoenas in place for information since September of 2016. That information has still not been made available. That alone should warrant a special prosecutor. And so that deep state, they don't want to be exposed. They don't want accountability, and they will do everything they can to embarrass the Trump administration and protect their backside on everything else they've done.
Because you know a lot of people, when you say that, they're like, oh, that's very conspiracy theory. It's very Nancy Drew.
I never started there, but I can tell you, having looked under the hood, that's exactly what you see. And you come to no other conclusion, but why is it that they're hiding this? Remember, Mr. Director of the FBI, in a closed case, will not share that with Congress, which is, in essence, the American people. It's a closed case. Why not share everything?
All right. We're going to look forward to your book.
Thank you.
It's out this fall, correct?
Yes. Yes, it is.
All right. Always good to see you.
Thanks
for coming in. All right. A Rear Admiral who served to replace Dr. David Shulkin as Secretary of the Veterans Affairs Department this week. Some commentators accusing him of not having enough management experience. Others ignoring qualifications, simply calling Jackson Trump's doctor. Well, Donald Trump Jr. responded to one outlet by reminding the BBC he was also President Obama's doctor. Is outrage justified? Let's welcome tonight's panel. Jessica Tarlov, the Senior Director of Research at Bustle.com and a Fox News contributor. Larry O'Connor, an Associate Opinion Editor at The Washington Times. And Kayleigh McEnany, the National Spokesperson for the RNC. Welcome to all of you.
Hi, Shannon.
Thanks, Shannon. Okay, so to give you a little example of this, a doctor himself who writes for The Hill, he's a healthcare columnist, he said this: Trump replaces Veterans Affairs Secretary David Shulkin with Ronnie Jackson, Trump's personal physician. In other news, Transportation Secretary Chow's being replaced with an Uber driver, and Agriculture Secretary Perdue with steak and ketchup. Larry.
Hey, it's an outrage. You know, they made it sound like this was Donald Trump's cardiologist from the mid-90s or something. This is a man who served admirably in the Navy as an admiral. He served multiple presidents, including Obama and Trump. And guess what? You know, this whole thing about his qualifications and frankly, given how this town is run, I would rather have an Uber driver running transportation. And I think that this admiral, if he could face down the White House press corps as effectively as he did, I think maybe he can also face down the bureaucracy that is the VA. People are forgetting that our veterans need a much better organized bureau to take care of their health care needs, and they have been neglected up until now. So I welcome this move.
Jessica, do you think he got fair treatment?
I think he did by majority of commentators and pundits out there. Yes, obviously that sounds a little absurd. We're not going to have Uber drivers, and Elaine Chao seems to be doing a good job in transportation. I think the real key here is the management experience, which you highlighted in the introduction to the segment here. That's the main concern. It's interesting to look at the comments that have come out of the heads of the Veterans Affairs Committee in the Senate, Johnny Isakson and Jon Tester from Montana Suva, a Republican and a Democrat, both saying they're looking forward to learning more about him. I think that's mainly the issue, that they're not completely sure what's going on. But the outgoing VA secretary was confirmed 100-0. So there is precedent here of bipartisan uniformity here in approving of secretaries. So we'll see what happens. But I think it's the management experience that's the real crux of the issue.
Kayleigh, when I saw this reaction yesterday, it reminded me of a couple weeks ago when John Bolton was announced that he would be the new national security advisor to the president. I looked up and literally one of the screens said Fox News analyst tapped to be the national security advisor. I'm like, this man was an ambassador to the UN. He was an undersecretary at the State Department. You know, do you think it's just a knee-jerk reaction to go after these nominees?
No doubt about it, Shannon. I saw that same lower third that you saw on an alternate network. It was laughable how they downplayed Mr. Bolton's experience. And same here. They're calling him a physician, neglecting to mention that he's been widely praised by the Obama administration. Senior advisor Dan Pfeiffer saying he's a phenomenal doctor. The former deputy chief of staff for Obama saying he's a saint, he's a patriot, there's no one better than him. him. And yet, nevertheless, you have the media apoplectic with this reaction. But it's predictable. It's what they do to anything that has the name Trump attached to it.
Yeah, I think this is very low level on the apoplectic scale here. If we were at Armageddon at the tax bill, this is like way down here. That you have a few snarky
not a good
tweets.
Standard.
But the hypocrisy.
That's what we're working with.
Speaking of Armageddon, there's something coming that may be the apocalypse, which is slightly different. We want to ask you guys about this report that a part of a Chinese space station about the size of a school bus, I'm told it's about 9 tons, is apparently going to come back into the atmosphere sometime Saturday or into Sunday on Easter, which also happens to be April Fool's Day, which makes me worry that if something goes wrong, people are not going to think it's an actual story. But it is. CNET.com says this. It's important to notice that, and I'm going to say this wrong, Tiangong 1 is very, very likely to come down in the ocean or somewhere rural, but there are some cities with a population over 1 million in the predicted flight path. Now, they're saying this could just break up and look like a beautiful meteor shower. Larry, how worried are you on a scale of 1 to 10?
First of
if at all?
I really like Tiangong 1 with a side of sweet and sour sauce, usually, and fried
I'm sure
rice.
I butchered the pronunciation.
My kids used to watch this animated show, Magic School Bus. Who knew the school bus was made in China? I had no idea. My understanding is this thing is going to break up in the atmosphere. The odds of getting nailed by one of these things is 1 in 300 trillion. The bad news is that
you're saying there's a chance.
There is a chance. Well, and that 1 in 300 trillion number is the same odds that most pundits in Washington gave Donald Trump winning the election.
So it could happen.
I'll be watching the skies just in case.
All right, Kayleigh, what do you think? I mean, it's an actual story. It's something that's going to happen.
Well, I was quite concerned when I read this. I guess I'm the only one who will be looking up to make sure there's not a piece of debris falling down on my head. And by the way, warning to viewers, if you see a piece of debris on the ground, apparently it irradiates poison of some sort, so don't touch it because it's dangerous.
Yeah, and Jessica, I also found out you could get in a lot of trouble if you see any of this, if it washes up on the beach, if you happen to see it come down, a chunk of it, that there are laws against you. Not only you're going to hurt yourself, the health warning from Kayleigh, but there are laws about who it belongs to, apparently the country of origin, which would be China here. So if you try to get some cool souvenir or show people your piece of space junk, you could be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know what the Instagram rules are before you have to send it back. But yes, it does belong to China and I guess should be returned. It is that poison gas or fluid. I don't know exactly how it comes out. That is the dangerous part. But I think I read in one of the articles that only 1 person in the U.S. ever has been harmed by such an instance. It was in the 80s.
Weird thing is, if you do get hit by a Chinese satellite, oddly, 2 hours later, you're hungry again.
No,
I don't understand that.
No,
I read that
Larry.
somewhere.
No,
I'm sure I did.
No, he didn't.
All right.
But Kayleigh, why do you think we haven't heard about this story? Do you think it'll be a quote, nothing burger, which I know a lot of people are over that word for this year, but, you know, it is out there. You would want people to, like I said, I worry that it is happening on April Fool's Day, that people will think this is not actually a thing.
Right, it's amazing. You know, the media is so busy covering Donald Trump's salad dressing choice for the day, they miss a giant Chinese spaceship floating down to Earth that could harm us all. So that's probably the reason why.
I mean, Jessica, do you think it's a nice distraction from what's going on here in D.C.?
I mean, I'm enjoying this panel more than I usually enjoy panels. Well, I haven't had to talk about Hillary Clinton yet. I guess I just did it to myself. But yeah, it's an interesting distraction. It's also just an interesting phenomenon that this happened and the rules about it, that it still belongs to China even if it falls on our landmass, as it were. So yeah, I'm into it, digging it.
Give us another thing that we have to negotiate with China about. And listen, the president, our president, and President Xi Jinping seem to be great friends, at least on some level. So maybe this will give them another something.
It is April Fool's Day, but it's also Easter. So if people don't know about this story and they see this, they might have a come to Jesus moment. So that could be a good thing.
That is what Easter is all about.
That's right.
All right, have a wonderful weekend, all of you.
Shannon.
Great to see you,
Shannon. Too. Thanks, Shannon.
All right, in England, economic reality is set in for a former soldier who's really a hero. Still ahead, we're going to have details on the unfortunate fate of his medals earned on the battlefields in a very amazing way in Afghanistan, why he may have to part with them. Stick around for that. The neck on a battlefield in Afghanistan. The shot knocked him off a roof. He plunged 8 feet to the ground, but luckily a goat, of all things, broke his fall. Now, miraculously, he survived the bullet wound and, in fact, carried on fighting for an hour and a half. For his bravery, Maloney was awarded the Conspicuous Gallantry Cross by Queen Elizabeth, Britain's second highest military honor. Now he says, though, because he lives just outside London, where home prices are through the roof, he can only afford to buy a house if he sells his metals. He'll do that, he says, for about $160,000 US. He says he's proud of the metals and what they represent, but that he's making the most logical decision so he can get into Britain's overheated housing market. What a hero. All right, thanks for joining us tonight. Most watched, most trusted, most grateful you spent your evening with us. Good night from Washington. I'm Shannon.